Welcome to the Plant-Based Podcast. Did you know that plants are truly amazing? Not only can you grow them and eat them, you can also wear them, drink them, nourish your skin with them, and so much more. Let Ellen and Michael inspire you to love plants as much as they do, as they chat with the movers and shakers in this wonderful plant-based world. So, let's dig in.
Brought to you with Lava Light. Whether you're a novice gardener, specialist grower, or houseplant enthusiast, Lava Light can help you to nourish and protect your plants all year round. The collection comprises 8 different horticultural growing media and pest control products, each continually offering the same natural benefits from thermal protection and moisture retention to soil conditioning and continued nutrient boosts. Derived from volcanic deposits, Lava Light is completely natural and sustainable. Look out for it online or in your local gardening stores. Today we have a gastropod expert on the podcast, and we think you're really going to enjoy our chat. We'd like to welcome Dr. Hayley Jones, who's an entomologist at the RHS, and she's going to chat through a range of gardening pests.
Although that word pest might just be a slight misnomer, because there may be indeed some different ways to deal with the range of gardening problems, should we call them perhaps? And it's time to embrace a new way to garden. I love the sound of that. Welcome to the podcast, Hayley.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. We can't wait.
How are you doing? You seem really smiley today. You're in your insect cupboard, aren't you? That's why,
yes.
Right?
I'm in the insect collection, although it's not always good because it's kept quite cold in here to help keep the collection safe from pests. So it's a bit colder in here than in the other rooms, but it's not too bad.
So tell us, you work at the RHS now, but tell us about what your job involves today, but also kind of what you did to train for it, or take us right back to your childhood if you need to, when you were first playing with the gastropods. And tell us what gastropods are as well, because Ellen and I just thrown this word around like we know what it really means.
Yeah, so gastropods is the word for slugs and snails that live on the land. So that's like the collective scientific term for slugs and snails together. They're very similar creatures. Snails, the original form in terms of evolution, and slugs have evolved multiple separate times from that snail body form. But yeah, that's why we say gastropods. But comparatively, I've come late in life to slugs and snails. I think if you'd met child me, you'd probably guess I'd be involved with the natural world and maybe animals, but not necessarily slugs and snails. I studied biology at university, and we had like a kind of a professor mentor there who introduced me to the world of invertebrates. He was really into moths and to other kinds of like insects that you might find. And so when I was looking, I knew I wanted to stay in research and to study the natural world. And I ended up doing a PhD on moths. Mm-hmm. So that's when I got my in-depth kind of training on scientific research, and I studied the flight ability of moths. So it's normally like that with PhD research, just a very small topic. It wasn't just moths, it was the flight ability of moths. Yeah. And then when I completed, by the time I'd finished that, I considered myself to be an entomologist, someone who specialises in insects. And then the RHS was coincidentally advertising for an entomologist. So I applied, and when I started work, you really have to know a little bit about everything. So I've learned about all kinds of garden insects and other animals, even up to the big stuff. Like people ask questions about how can they stop my next door neighbour's cat from digging in my vegetable bed. So we have to know a little bit about a lot of things. And then I was set on a literature review for slugs and snails, trying to find better ways to control them. And that turned into a whole scheme of research. And now apparently I'm a slug expert.
I don't know. I mean, you could be called worse things than a slug expert, right?
Yeah. Often
not?
it's slug lady though. Like people will be like, "Oh yes, talk to Hayley. She's a slug lady," and it's like, well, that conjures up a different image.
That's so funny. What's your current work at the moment then? What's your job right now at the RHS?
My job is split into like many different responsibilities. So probably a third of my time is spent on our advisory service for members. So RHS members can write in with their gardening questions. And if it's anything to do with an animal in any way, it gets allocated to the team that I'm in. And we like help them with their problems, or sometimes they're just asking for advice on like what to plant for wildlife, all kinds of questions. But if it's related to an animal, then we answer it. And then the next biggest chunk of my work is research, which could be different topics over time, but slugs is like the biggest and most consistent topic that I've studied since I've been at the RHS. And then probably the rest of my time is spent trying to turn all that knowledge that we have from the science into communications for members and the wider public, like writing stuff for our magazine, for the website, going out and about at various events and talking about slugs and more.
Your job sounds really cool. Honestly, it's varied, but it's all based around that one topic. And you mentioned the research you've done into like the barrier methods for keeping slugs and snails, out of your garden or away from your plants, should I say. Can you tell us a bit about that research, what it's all about? What did you discover from it, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so that goes back to the literature review that started me on my slug journey. The aim was to see if science could give more control options for gardeners. A lot of the research that's been done previously is for an agricultural setting, because obviously food security is really important, and that's where most of the research funding is. But the kinds of control methods that work on a field scale, or even on like a professional horticulture scale, is quite different to what gardeners can and want to do. And so a big kind of hole in the scientific evidence was these cultural measures such as barriers. Barriers are kind of the holy grail because the idea is they don't harm the slug and snail in any way. They just provide a tidy little fence that they won't cross. But there is almost no scientific evidence for most of the things, even things that people talk about a lot and have done for a long time. Things like eggshells, you can find references to them for years and years and years, but no real evidence for them. And so that's where I thought the RHS and me is ideally placed to try and fill these gaps in the knowledge. And so for this particular one, I designed an experiment where we grew lettuces, some in pots and some in raised beds, and they were given a number of different barriers around the outside, and obviously some left untreated for control. And then we just measured the leaf damage. And unfortunately, we found that none of the barriers we tested in that experiment were effective at keeping the slugs out.
So no eggshells? Oh, no.
So I think it was eggshells, wool pellets, grit, so fine gravel, bark mulch, and copper were the ones that we tested in that experiment. None of them worked. But for some of that's not really surprising. A lot of the barriers, so copper is an interesting one. I might revisit that in a later experiment because in some studies it works, in some studies it doesn't. So there's something that we can maybe tease out there. But all of the other ones work on the idea that it's sharp or rough or really dry. And why that is true, and that might be unpleasant for slugs and snails, they have this layer of mucus on their bodies that keeps them hydrated. If they need to cross something that's unpleasant, they can produce an extra thick mucus to protect themselves. So really those barriers, if what's on the other side is really attractive, they're going to be motivated to just produce that extra mucus and get there anyway.
There's going to be so many upset gardeners at this, but I put eggshells around all my plants. I can, from my own very small garden experience at container gardening, that is, that copper tape. Like, what do you mean here we go? In a larger garden, I've never really had a problem with slugs and snails at all, apart from minor damage. But in the container garden, copper tape around the containers does seem to help, but it needs replacing fairly often. That's what I found. And there's no scientific basis of that. It's just from my own observations.
Maybe your plants were just not that attractive.
Maybe they weren't. I mean, I don't plant anything specifically, that slugs or snails don't like. I plant what I like. And we do have quite a lot of slugs and snails around. It's like well known in the row of gardens at the back of our house, so everyone's complaining about them. But the copper tape seems to keep them away from those pots.
So that wouldn't necessarily surprise me, because I think part of it as well is the effort, the amount of effort involved, and already going up the outside of a pot is already more effort. So if there's that plus whatever this kind of unpleasant we think it might be more like a chemical reaction, like creating copper salts.
Right.
So if it's the distance plus the copper, that might be more likely to actually have a deterrent effect. I think that's why it needs more study. Some of the techniques that people use, again, it's like not likely to work. So one of the things I tested was the copper collars, and those, I think they were like 10 centimeters deep, and you kind of push them into the soil a little bit, but slugs can just dig underneath. They in the daytime, they're hiding underground anyway. So
I thought you were going to say slugs, they can jump.
New research.
It's a little known fact.
Not jumping, but definitely digging.
Yeah.
And then the other thing with the copper tape is that the product that we bought, which was just from like a generic supermarket type brand, it didn't tarnish over the course of our experiment. And when we looked at it, we weren't sure if it had been laminated with plastic to keep it shiny and attractive, but that would negate any copper effect. So again, I need to do a study maybe that's just on copper, that uses like different brands, different shapes, wires, all kinds of things, because there's definitely something there for copper, but how can we make it more reliable?
Yeah.
Was there a difference between slugs and snails, or they're basically the same animal? Animal, is that the right word?
Yeah. So they are fundamentally very much the same. But it's just that the slugs, their shell is really, really reduced. They do still have a shell, but it's underneath their skin for most of them, and it's really small. So the main difference is behavioural. They can't hide inside their shell to protect themselves from the dry or from predators or whatever. So instead, slugs spend a lot of time underground. And so that, like, in terms of their biology, it's not a big difference, but to behaviour, it does make a big difference. For control measures, that can make a difference, because snails tend to roost above ground, whereas slugs underneath the ground. So if you're thinking about biological control, the nematode thing that you can water into the ground, that's going to get slugs because they're hiding there, but it's not going to get snails. But if you put it on the snail, it would affect them. But because of where they are, it's less likely to be effective.
So after all this research, what is then your ideal ethical advice for dealing with slugs and snails?
Well, the most ethical solution is just to let them be. But I know that's a big ask, especially if people are trying to grow lettuces and other things that are really gonna suffer. Encouraging more natural predators and just generally getting your growing space into more of a balance, that's going to help. If you're growing ornamental, then you can kind of outpace them. So if you can just grow lots and lots of stuff, you're less likely to see damage that's going to bother you, because it's only about the aesthetics. That's definitely at the RHS gardens, people say things like, oh, you hardly have any damage, and that's not really true. We do have damage. It's just when you're looking at a huge deep flower bed with all these different layers, your eye is not zooming in on the wholly leaves, but they are there.
So grow more en masse.
Grow some density so that there's enough for them to feed on and there's still plenty left behind. That can be true for some of your veg. Like, I don't know, I suppose if you were growing brassicas, you might be able to tolerate some of the leaves at the bottom having holes in, because the stuff you're going to eat nearer the top wouldn't be so affected. And then there are control measures that we do recommend if you need to. Hand picking, so going out at night with a torch. That way you can catch the ones that are definitely doing damage rather than some of the other species that would just be in the area feeding on rotting material.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next step up would be the biological control agent. That is very good for something like watering into a vegetable bed, especially if you're growing lettuces, because as well as affecting the slugs that are already in there, it has a bit of a deterrent effect as well, they found.
Okay.
So yeah, there is options, and you probably, if you're in a really sluggy place where like the soil and the conditions suit them, you're never ever gonna get rid of them, but you can, use different protections to protect the plants that you really need to.
Okay,
Michael.
Sorry, go on, darling.
Don't tell me that I'm going to get on my soapbox now.
Here we go.
Just don't say it. Don't say it. But on my allotment, it's a no-dig allotment. It's sandy. It's sandy. I knew you would have to say something. Anyway, it's sandy soil,
Yeah.
And then it's no-dig, and it's as biodiverse as I can get it to be. I let stuff grow. I have wildflowers and weeds, and I garden veganically, so I don't use any animal product at all. I don't harm anything, not a slug, not a snail, not a bug, nothing. I just literally let nature do what it wants to do, with me helping obviously along by ensuring that I have all those aspects. And I grow lots of different stuff as well. And I can honestly tell you, over the course, so this particular allotment I've had for, I think I'm coming into the 5th year, and the change each year has been quite dramatic. And my neighbours will say to me, but how come you don't have slugs and snails eating your brassicas? Or how come you don't have any weeds, or whatever in the no-dig beds? And I'm like, well, because I just actually let it be. I'm just managing it along gently without interfering in the biodiverse and the ecosystem there. And yeah, sure, there's some slugs, and the underneath leaves on a cabbage might get munched, but nothing else does. And if I've got, 20 lettuces and 2 get eaten, that doesn't matter to me as a home grower, at all. So just literally letting it be has made all of the difference. And now I'm completely happy to see slugs and snails, because they're part of the whole system anyway. We need them, don't we, in the garden, whatever. So I realise that's sounding, very much like, look what I'm doing, but it has been a process, and I've been observing it very closely over the years, and I've genuinely seen it get better and better and work better for the whole plot. And so now when I see a slug, I'm kind of like, oh, that's cute, hi, and I don't freak out. So it's kind of changing that attitude and how we view them, isn't it, as well? Anyway, there you go.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's a bit of both. It's the taking that hands-off approach to get the natural predators and everything, and the whole system to try and be a bit more balanced. But yeah, it's less stressful to just choose not to be bothered by their presence and a bit of damage.
What would be the natural predators? Because kind of in my head, I'm thinking birds, hedgehogs. Is there some obvious ones I've missed?
Yeah, so there's probably the big one that people don't think of is ground beetles. So they're almost as small as the slugs themselves. So they might go unnoticed. They are pretty good predators of slugs and snails, and they are there crawling around amongst your leaf litter already. But then there's other big ones, foxes, slow worms, frogs and toads are a good one. If it's possible to have a pond nearby, they will definitely eat some. Hedgehogs are famous. People talk about hedgehogs eating slugs and snails, but slugs and snails actually form a relatively small part of a hedgehog's diet. They prefer to eat caterpillars and beetle larvae and other things like that.
And we will move on from slugs and snails, I promise. And in your research, you obviously tested the different barriers, etc. But is there any research into the type of plant that slugs and snails go for? Because if a leaf is more leathery, for example, that's going to be a lot less attractive. I remember years ago when I was putting together plant catalogues, it was always the hosta plantaginia, which is the one with the more leathery strap-like foliage that was less affected by slugs because it was harder to navigate, and it was always the kind of, the flat kind of Sibboldiana that were eaten more. So is there much research that's been done on the type of plants that are more susceptible?
Yeah, I think there's been a bit of research. There's some more kind of general research about like what kinds of plant traits are more or less attractive, and like you said, things that are tough, leathery, waxy, furry, any things like that are less likely to be fed on. Like if you live in a place where like the slugs and snails are a massive problem, you might just have to realize you need to choose more woody plants. You're not going to be able to have as much soft bedding. The different varieties is a more interesting question. I know that there's a few hostas that advertise themselves as being slug resistant, but I don't know if there's research behind that. There's not like publicly available research behind that. I don't know if the growers have done systematic experiments. I actually supervise a student who's done some feeding experiments where she has, in a small laboratory test, offered discs of different leaves from a slug resistant and a regular variety, and rotted as well. But she's analysing that data at the moment, writing up her thesis.
They're probably ones that I sold in a catalogue many years ago.
But so the results should be out next year. But even then, that's 2 varieties tested. You know, it would be huge to test everything. But there's definitely some broad rules. But if you really want to grow hostas, it's always going to be a battle.
Yeah, I'll definitely. Or I've always thought if I want to grow really good hostas, I'll just plant some sacrificial lettuce nearby. That's a good idea, right? Just a ring of lettuce around the hosta.
Companion planting is another thing that's really interesting. Like there's been some research done on companion planting, especially in agricultural settings, but nothing I've seen that I can easily translate to advice. But as well as that, like sacrificial planting, there's the other option of like deterrent planting. So like interplanting onions or other alliums with your soft and fleshy stuff, because that is supposed to have a deterrent effect. But there's not like loads of science done on whether that works and how to do it.
There's the garlic solution as well. Who's the hosta guy that does all of the exhibitions and shows?
Spray.
Oh yeah,
So it's like you crush 2 garlic bulbs, like the whole thing, not just a clove. You crush 2 of them, soak it in water, strain it, and then dilute that with water. And apparently that's how he keeps his hostas absolutely pristine. So maybe there's something in that too.
Yeah. Garlic is an interesting one. There's definitely like some studies been done showing it as having a deterrent effect, but also a pesticidal effect. So that's when it gets a bit hazier about whether I would recommend people like doing their homebrew garlic pesticides to spray about the place. But I think there's also at least one product that's registered that's been tested and everything.
My name's Andy from Urban Herbs, and today I want to tell you about 3 foodie herbs that I think you're going to absolutely love in the 2023 growing season. The first one is lemon curd thyme. Doesn't that sound amazing? Well, I can promise you it smells even better. For years and years we travelled around the country selling our herbs at food festivals, and the reaction of people to these amazing plants always delighted me, and the reaction to lemon curd thyme was really special. This is a variety of lemon thyme that is a little bit sweeter than your normal lemon thyme. Lemon curd thyme makes a great herbal tea. It's great with chicken or fish, providing that beautiful sweet and sour flavour. And during lockdown, we discovered it makes a great herbal tea too. So lemon curd thyme is the first foodie herb that I think you should definitely grow in 2023. The second is barbecue rosemary. Yeah, this is rosemary with a smoky kick to it. It's beautiful for using to season meat, and we've put it with veggie stir fries too. The smoky flavour comes across so strongly, and we absolutely love barbecue rosemary. It's just as easy to grow as normal rosemary too. The third foodie herb that I think you should grow in 2023 is winter savoury. And I know that some of you will already be familiar with this beautiful plant, but to me, winter savoury simply smells like the best food ever. It really, really does. The flavour is slightly peppery, and we love adding it to chilli or soup or stew, and it is absolutely perfect for enjoying on a chilly night in early spring. I absolutely love adding this to dishes and then smelling it all day long as it exudes that beautiful flavour from the slow cooker. I really hope you enjoyed those 3 foodie herbs that I think you're going to absolutely love growing in 2023.
Hi, it's me, Ellen Mary. I'm here to tell you all about People, Plants, Wellbeing, where you can find your magic through the power of plants and nature. We have a wellbeing retreat coming up on the 21st to the 23rd of April. It's in Norfolk in the UK, and it's all about reconnecting, resetting, and rejuvenating yourself through immersive nature experiences. There's going to be guided walks, there's going to be foraging talks and walks, bathing under the stars, evening time walks, mindful gardening sessions, plants and crafts, plant-based foods. Everyone's going to feed off the amazing group energy, and it's all set in private woodland. It is going to be epic. You can even get a massage, you can opt in for a Reiki session or hypnotherapy as well. So check it out, peopleplantswellbeing.com, click on Wellbeing Retreats, and you'll find all the information you need to join us on the Wild Wellbeing Retreat.
So we are going to move on from gastropods, obviously. I just want to say, like, obviously, all pests, kind of, we think of them as pests, but I think they need inverted commas because, you know, all pests kind of have a place in the garden. There's a reason they're there. There's something that naturally, you know, is a predator on that pest, even though the pest is actually then feeding on something else as well. And altogether, it's important for the biodiversity. And would you say that the public is now starting to see that a little bit more? Have you noticed a real shift in how people are dealing with pests, whether that is, you know, biological control or simply, you know, dissuading the pests or kind of growing a different plant or like Ellen does, kind of just putting up with it and realizing that everything in balance just kind of works?
Yeah, definitely. So I think we've been in recent times, we've been actually really trying to push this actively to say, like, don't automatically label things pests, everything, you know, everything that's in the garden, you need to assess whether it really is a problem before you just kind of leap in. But we want to encourage that, but that's also in reaction to what we've seen. So I've been at the RHS nearly 8 years now, and even in that relatively short window, I've seen the shift in the tone of the kinds of inquiries that we get. So there's still a few of the people who they send a picture of some damage and they're like, what is this and how do I kill it? You know, end of. And then there's always been some people who've said, I want to help this wildlife, and people in the middle saying, this is causing me a problem, but I don't want to use pesticides, or I want to do it in a more eco-friendly way. And then over that time, the proportion who are either considering or wholly embracing the more environmental friendly approach is growing and growing. And so, yeah, now we're helping that along. So hopefully it will spiral and spiral and it will become normal.
Definitely.
Yeah, I like that very much.
It becomes a word of the past almost. Yeah.
I kind of like to think that weed will become a word of the past as well, if I'm honest.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. You know, in years to come, people will look back and they'll read through the textbooks and they'll go, did they really call them pests? There's a project, it's an RHS science project called Plants for Bugs. And we'd love to know a little bit more about that. I believe it's to do with encouraging, you know, bugs into the garden via what kind of plants that you choose. So yeah, like, I mean, I hadn't seen it until we talked about doing this podcast, and now I'm fully like on board reading it. So if you can tell us a bit more about that would be great.
Yeah. So that was like quite a big kind of research project, started before I joined the RHS. And then was going on when I arrived. But the aim was to test the kind of what diversity you would see on different sets of plants. So they had 3 categories of plants. They were arranged in kind of square beds built to be like a garden bed. So they were each bed would have one woody shrub, one climber, however much bedding, a grass, and so on. So it was like kind of realistic mini garden plots, and they would have all these different functions, but one set was completely native British plants. One set was called near native, so coming from the northern hemisphere. And then the final set was the exotic ones, which were southern hemisphere. And over the course of a few years, they recorded all kinds of mostly invertebrate wildlife on those plants, visiting the flowers, walking along the soil surface, or on the leaves themselves. So they kind of tried to measure absolutely all of the diversity that they could see in those plots. And the results of that were interesting. Like, we often assume that it has to be 100% native to be of benefit to native wildlife. But this study showed that wasn't necessarily the case. The native plants did have the highest diversity, but the near natives and the exotics started to show real benefits at different times of the season. So exotic plants could be used to start the season earlier, so have more flowering plants for those really early emerging bees, or later flowering at the other end. So from that, we kind of concluded that while native plants should always be a staple if you're aiming for wildlife, the gardener can still incorporate some of these non-natives, many of which have become garden favourites already. You can incorporate them and actually add a benefit to wildlife. And the like biggest takeaway was just the more vegetation you have, like the thicker the vegetation cover, the more creatures you will see. So density and diversity of your planting is how you're gonna get all the other creatures to come in and visit.
Yeah, I love that. My kind of gardening, just bung it all in, loads of it. There's always space for one more plant.
That's what I'm doing in my front garden, but I don't think my neighbours understand. So, Hayley, kind of, you're obviously working on the RHS pest panel, we could almost call it. So if you look back kind of 10 years or so, you must have seen a real difference, not only in the attitude of people talking about the pests they've got, the problems they've got, but the type of pests that people are coming to you with. Is there a certain pest that you don't hear about anymore? Or are there some that are kind of newbies as well? What about the Spanish slug era? That was quite a thing about 15 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think if there's something that we don't see anymore. There probably is, but it's harder to notice something as it slowly fades away than something that's like new and exciting. There definitely is shifts in what we see. So we have talked a lot about, not labeling everything a pest, but there is also the other hard truth, which is with climate change and with increasing globalization, we do see lots of new things, and things that come in from abroad have the potential to be way more damaging because they often arrive without all their natural predators. It can take years or sometimes never happen that all the predators and parasitoids catch up to keep that thing in check. So something that arrives and gets established can really throw the ecosystem out of whack. So there will never be a time, I don't think, where we can stop using the word pest, because there will always be things that are causing a disproportionate problem. And new arrivals is definitely one of them. Or the thing that we've really noticed this autumn is things that have been hanging around in glass houses for a long time becoming an increasing problem outside. So glasshouse thrips, I don't know if you've seen that in your gardens. So it's called the glasshouse thrips, tiny little sausage-shaped creature, practically microscopic, and they are sapsuckers. So they pierce the surface of the leaf with their mouth parts, and it causes this kind of mottling. And then as the season goes on, it gets a kind of a silvery sheen, and the leaf starts to look really dead. And you get all these like dark spots on the underside of their excrement. And that used to be a thing where when we give advice, we'd say a cold winter will probably kill these off whenever it was seen outside. But now we've started to change our advice. These things are here to stay. And this warm summer, followed by warm autumn, we have seen so many reports of them. And we also used to say, the plants will recover next year. But now you see photos and you're like, oh, I'm not actually sure if it's coming back from that level of damage. And there's bound to be more creatures like that are waiting to get established in a slightly warmer Britain.
Oh, naughty things. What about anything that's completely disappeared? So that's something that we've had as pests in the past, but now they've gone for whatever reason.
Oh, that's a really hard question. I mean, I'm sure there is examples, but I can't think of one off the top of my head, things that have disappeared. Because a lot of the things when we notice that they're gone, it's because we don't want them to go. Like when we're thinking about different, butterflies, bumblebees, that kind of thing. No, I can't think of an example. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine. Like the things that we want to keep are the ones that are disappearing, and the ones we don't want to keep are the ones that aren't disappearing, right?
But there will be some interesting new arrivals as well. Things like the tree bumblebee is an example. I think it was 2011 that first was seen in the UK, and that has now got really well established in the UK. And it's not something that we are scared about because it kind of fills a niche that is helpful to fill. It's not out competing something else. Like lots of new stuff arrives all the time. It's only a minority that goes on to become a problem. So we will see new faces. We'll probably see new moths and butterflies and bees that are spreading northwards from the continent, and they'll become our new normal wildlife as the years go on. The hummingbird hawk moth is another one, because obviously I love moths, and they are spectacular hovering day flying moths. They are migrants. They fly over the channel in the summer, and they feed here, sometimes reproduce and then go back again, but in the future they could live here all year round, and we'd see a lot more of them, and that would be a positive.
Yeah, isn't it amazing to think those tiny little wings fly their way over the channel? Like it's a long distance for a tiny little thing to fly. It's extraordinary.
Yeah. And moths in particular, there's a few species that migrate huge distances. There's one called the silver Y that actually overwinters in Africa. And in the spring, the generation that hatches in the spring starts flying north, and then they might, land in Spain or France. The next generation will keep going north. So they're flying hundreds of miles, but their ultimate journey is over more than one generation, which is, I don't know, it's just amazing to think of that, like the programming that it takes to just be like, okay, going this way, and then autumn comes and they're like, reverse, and head all the way back again to their wintering grounds.
That's cool. I got a question to ask you now, which I'm not sure if it's an easy question to answer or not, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I want to ask, is it essential to recognize a pest before it's a pest, or is that easier said than done? Like, what would be telltale signs of some of the most common pests? And can you get in there before it's too late, or is it not possible and we just have to surrender to whatever our bio gardener's doing?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think there's definitely things. So in terms of if you've got year-on-year experience, you can start to know what's happened previously that's likely to be recurring and get in there early with your control options if need be. But if there's something brand new that you've never seen before, it's definitely not easy to recognize whether it's going to be a pest, whether it's going to be a problem. Things that feed on the growing points and cause really distorted growth, those are probably going to be something that you don't want, because if it's disrupting, if it's going into the new season and it's disrupting all the plant's growth, then that might cause a check in health that it's not going to be able to recover from. Whereas something that's just nibbling, especially if it's only nibbling like lower leaves or some portion of leaves, it's more likely to just be tolerable. You've got enough foliage to share.
Interesting. So here we are as adults talking about pests all very enthusiastically. But how do you get kids involved? Do you have any tips? There's a lot going on, about how, we're losing insects at such a rapid rate, and that's essential basically for life on planet to have this biodiversity and all the insects that we often don't think about. How important is it for children to get involved in nature and understanding, the importance of insects in general, and any tips for parents of how to get them involved?
Yeah, I think it's really important to engage children, but it's also, in my experience, very easy to engage children. Like, they're normally there until they get to the age where the whole "it's not cool to be excited" sets in. Before that age, it's really easy to get them interested in insects and other wildlife. I often like to start on the very hungry caterpillar, because most teeny tiny children have read that story and are familiar with that story, and it's a good jumping point to talk about kind of insect life cycles. You think about how the baby insect, the caterpillar, it eats this type of food, but then it transforms, and as an adult it's got this completely different body that's beautiful but also has completely different behaviors. Like, it's a really good springboard into some quite complex science. But they all understand, everyone understands the metamorphosis, because they know the very hungry caterpillar. So then once you can pull them in, you can feed them so much information about the different insects and other creatures that they'll see in their gardens, and the behaviors that they're getting up to, and the functions that they're performing in the ecosystem. So you can kind of layer it up there from a good starting point. And we like to just show people, so bring specimens that they can look at, or go out and do bug hunts. And if you can pique their interest young, they will carry that through. You might not be able to know, okay, that kid's going to be an entomologist or another kind of scientist, but it is those little contacts, especially if they get it more than once, that will lead to them having a different attitude when they're an adult.
That's cool.
Totally. Yeah, great.
Gosh, Hayley, this is such a great chat. We could chat all day, actually.
I know.
But we can't. But before we close up, are there any other projects that are coming up you'd like to tell us about, kind of inside or outside the RHS? Any more games you're playing with slugs? Do you have any pet slugs at home, by the way?
I don't have any pet slugs right now. I did have African land snails for a little while, so those are pretty cool. And and we've had
big,
stick
right?
insects.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if they stop growing. Like, they get bigger and bigger the older they get. I think mine were only like 10, 12 centimeters shell length, but they get way bigger than that.
Really?
And stick insects are another fun pet.
I get terrified.
But we've got so I'll probably talk mostly about slug projects just because that's what I know best, but there is loads of interesting research going on here. So I had a summer student this year who was testing some spray on deterrents to slug feeding. So the results of that I'm hoping to publish next year. And the student I mentioned earlier who is doing her PhD, hers is mostly on slug and snail diversity. So her name's Imogen. She had a set of citizen scientists that she recruited all across the UK, and they went out for monthly slug hunts at night for a 30-minute walk, and they gathered all the slugs that they could get. We trained them to identify slugs, which is a really hard skill. And then they posted their slugs in so that Imogen could check their identifications. So there's the results of that should be out next year as well, looking at the diversity in gardens, but also how hard it is to identify slugs and how we can train people to get their eye in for this quite difficult group. Loads of interesting stuff coming.
That's brilliant.
That's very cool.
You love your job. We can tell you.
It is great. I'm really lucky.
Long gone are the days of putting beer traps out, I hope. I can always remember doing that as a kid. Like, genuinely, my mum would put like a beer trap out, and then in the morning they'd just all be frazzled and frothy, and it's so disgusting. But I can remember doing that, and that's not something I would do anymore because it's just gross. And I can also remember people saying, like, put salt on the slugs. I mean, that's just horrendous. No, thank you.
I would love to comment on beer traps, because beer traps are interesting as well. In terms of ethics, beer traps is actually pretty good, because if you want a humane way to kill an animal like a slug or a snail, drowning them in 5% alcohol is a pretty good choice. But there's loads of studies showing how many slugs you can catch with a beer trap, but I haven't found one that actually measured the plants and showed that the plants were better off for you having done that. So I'd like to look into that.
Yeah, that's just so you can have some beer. That's all. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you, and I really like the research that you're doing there, because you can then push that out to the general public and growers as well, professional growers too, in order, like you said at the very, very beginning, because food security ultimately is so important and biodiversity in general. So I think this has been super interesting. Is there anywhere online that listeners can go to find out more about the research you're doing, or like on the RHS website, anything like that?
Yeah, if you search RHS Hayley Jones, it should take you to my kind of profile page, which is due an update. I think it's got links to some of the current research going on. And I'm also on Twitter at Hayley Ento. And yeah, the RHS website in general, it has a lot of pages that can be difficult to find what you want. But once you get searching, there's on all the kinds of different organisms, different research, anything you might be interested in.
Wonderful. So basically, if listeners want to geek out on bugs in the garden, then head on over to the RHS website. Thank you so much, Hayley. It's been really, really good.
Very welcome. It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, this is Ben Yule from Worcester Terrariums, and today I'm going to talk to you about suitable terrarium plants. So the vast majority of plants used in a terrarium are tropical plants, and there are many species that are sold in garden centres and plant shops that work perfectly well. Things like Ficus pumila, Peperomia prostrata, and Pilea glauca work really, really well in a terrarium and can be bought in most garden centres and plant shops. If you're after rarer species, then I suggest finding out the Latin name and then searching it on eBay, because this often yields good results. Alternatively, you can join Facebook groups or online groups and forums, and if you ask people on there, people are usually very kind and friendly and will offer a plant swap of some sort. You can also check out rare plant specialists like Grow Tropicals, and while they specialise in aroids and houseplants, they also have a terrarium plant section on their website too, which has many different kinds of terrarium plants, both rare and more common. Now, my favourite aspect of terrarium building, and one that's exclusive to the hobby, is the ability to grow moss. So a terrarium is a very humid environment, and that is the perfect environment for mosses to grow. Now, you can get mosses from specialists like moss clerks, and what's great about moss clerks is that they only harvest from areas of woodland being felled for property development or timber production, so you can rest assured that your moss is coming from a good place. Some of my favourite terrestrial species to use are Lycobrium glaucum, which is known as bun moss, or Dicranum scoparium, which is known as greater fork moss. I really feel that mosses make a terrarium and they just really make them pop. Other kinds of mosses you can use are aquatic species, so mosses that are sold for the aquarium trade. Java moss, which is probably the most common species, which is Taxophyllum barbieri, or Christmas moss, which is Vesicularia montagni. Now, I lean towards these mosses more nowadays because, one, they look beautiful, two, they're fast growing, and three, they're easy to propagate. So plant species you should avoid in a terrarium. Any kind of succulent or cacti, because they grow in arid regions of the world where it's very hot and dry and they have lots and lots of light. And a terrarium is humid, and the plants used typically are forest floor plants, so they prefer lower light levels than cacti and succulents. Anything large-leaved, so while a monstera grows in the tropics, it's not going to fit in a terrarium unless it's absolutely massive. And anything that's too fast growing, that's a slight grey area because some terrarium plants are fast growing, and you can stay on top of them by pruning. But as a general rule, slower growing, smaller leaf plants are best. I'd like to thank you for having me once again. And next week, I'm going to talk about bioactive terrariums. And this has helped me grow my social media accounts to over 1.6 million followers. I'll see you then.
Brought to you with Lava Light. Derived from volcanic deposits, Lava Light can help you to nourish and protect your plants all year round. The collection comprises of 8 different horticultural growing media and pest control products. Look out for their colourful packs either online and in your local gardening stores. It will come to no surprise to our listeners that you are lying on a bed again.
Well, it'll come to even more surprise that you're between my legs.
That's totally gross.
No, you're between my legs on a cushion.
This sounds so wrong.
Oh, Ellen.
You are also in my closet, so there you go.
Ellen, I was with a friend of mine earlier called Judith, and she listens to our podcast. How lovely is that?
That's so nice.
Because it's weird to imagine that people listen to it sometimes.
Sometimes I think when we sit and chat and we do our little gossips, it's very easy to forget that people genuinely do download and listen to this garbage.
Yeah, but we gossip, but it's not on the deeper level gossip, you know.
Well, let's face it, we don't gossip.
DVD.
Oh, I just had a great idea. Idea. We don't gossip like we gossip when we record. So usually we have a little catch up before we press
Yeah.
We don't do that gossip. But maybe we should do like subscriptions or something. And the people who subscribe do get the garbage gossip.
No, the money goes to charity. Oh my God.
All money to charity.
I was nearly going to say we should really get over ourselves. Oh, how's your week been, Princess?
Princess.
I've never ever called you before, but
that's sweet. Are we going to be nice to each other now?
Yeah.
It was this week so far. So what are we at? Even the day Thursday. This has been a bit manic, and also it's been it's rain, torrential rain. So
we've seen.
Oh my gosh. It's been a lot. And I've just gone from one article to another article to another article, and then I've had loads of personal appointments in between. So this is the time of year where our health insurance renews. So you get your health insurance here in the US, and then you have to have your annual check and stuff, and then from that comes all the rest. And it's just
you have to be on a treadmill.
No, and everything's fine, all good and whatnot. But it's this week has just been all of it. Do you know what I mean? I've gone from one place to the next, to the next, to the next. In the pouring rain. So I haven't got anything amazingly exciting to tell you, apart from the fact I have just had delivered some plants for some aquascaping. So I'm going to do a mini aquascape, and that has excited me no end. Other than that, my week has not been as exciting as yours.
But you know what? You just managed to sound a load of boring stuff. You managed to make it sound really cool. I
don't know how it's not. But anyway, honestly, I'm genuinely interested in what you've been up to over in Germany, because I've obviously been seeing your stories and stuff, and there's some really cool things that you've been checking out.
Well, do you know what? When you see the stories, that's only like a tenth of it, because I think I drive people mad if I put it all there. But that's where you maybe need a subscription where someone has full access to my whole iPhone of photos, because just over the years you see some incredible stuff, and it's just and everything, especially when you're at a trade show, the time moves so quickly, and just I can barely remember what I saw an hour ago, let alone 2 days ago. And it's just, oh my God, it's the IPM ESSEN in Germany. And it's really, I've been coming here since I was at Thomson Morgan, so maybe almost 20 years. And it's, Glee in the UK is a very big show. This is maybe 2 to 3 times the size. So you really need 4 days really to see the whole show. I was going to say 4 days minimum, but it's only open for 4 days. So you only get that. It's like a game. You have to get around it all, and it's you're ticking off the halls, and I want to see everything. And this year I was really fortunate to work for the actual IPM, the organisers, making some content, highlighting the show, kind of filming with the team, and just I wanted to go around and see everything. So I actually neglected a lot of the plant stuff until the latter days, because I wanted to dig into the accessories, the machinery, kind of things that I wouldn't usually go and explore. So it's been phenomenal. I can go through my pictures with you if you want. Or just
That's
a few highlights?
A few highlights. I tell you why, because it sounded a bit like, when someone in the olden days would come back from holiday and then they'd make you go through all of the holiday photos.
I like to think a plant holiday would be a bit nicer to look through, though.
True. Highlights. Let's have some highlights.
Right, I'm going to give you maybe 4 from each day. Yeah?
Yeah, okay. That's a good idea.
Okay. I've just realised how much, you remarked on my blonde hair, which I actually regraded the other day, but I've just seen how much of the colour has actually fallen out. It's really
blonde.
Again.
It's really blonde. And before we started recording, we were saying how funny it is that Michael's trying to make his hair grey and I'm trying to hide my grey.
So I'll have to redo it again tomorrow, I think. So
yeah,
anyway.
I need a retouch up as well.
Yeah. I'm so like a Renault saloon. So I was really privileged to be on the Monday and they had the press conference and a kind of showcase of a lot of the new products. Really interesting. There's a lot of nice products from Czech Republic, actually. A company called Plasia. And they're making, I can show you the picture, even though it won't mean much to our listeners. But so these are the trays, kind of special devices where you can regrow a lot of vegetables.
Okay.
Microgreens as well. Also, they showed me a new prototype of something to grow mushrooms in too. So they really doing some cool stuff. And the way they explained how they develop products was really interesting as well. So they were saying kind of the need isn't always there straight away. Sometimes 5 years after the thing has been identified, because you have a few people kind of mixing around with it first, and then you have maybe a company that then goes for it a bit, and then it kind of then becomes a bit more mainstream after that, when bigger companies are doing it kind of more en masse, and probably they've improved the design at that point as well, and it becomes a good product to then launch. But it does take a little bit of time to get there, and it was really interesting to talk about that. Also a company called Wundergarten, which is a really cool name.
That's a great name.
We're doing, some have the biochar, charcoal you can use on the plants.
Yeah.
But they also had seeds that were coated in charcoal that was really interesting as well.
Okay.
They were from the showcase, and also learning about trends as well, because there's a guy, Manfred Hoffman, was talking about how trends come, and I kind of probably a bit cynical like you, and I worked in mail order marketing, and I kind of thought trends were like what we developed to sell things. But he actually said that society kind of almost cries out for the trend kind of a few years before it then happens. You just get a feeling of what, and kind of when you sit back and think, you kind of probably do get a bit of a sound of, what the feeling of the moment is. And obviously, taking on board events, world events, So it was really interesting, and put my cynical mind to bed. I don't know what you think of things like this. Terrarium, almost like tabletop planter with a light. And you find there's a lot of new kind of half plant container, half piece of furniture items at the show, especially from a company called Fusion Colours, which have got lamps that have then got a container at the bottom and a terrarium with a big kind of rustic lamp in the centre, and really that real hybrid things, which is quite an interesting movement as well, because when plants become part of furniture, you appreciate them in a really different way. So,
I think that's a good move, because it's a good way of incorporating plants into your aesthetic without perhaps it being a standalone plant. And also I think that links to biophilic design. Biophilic design, bringing animals in and all of that. That's a way of really merging plants into your interiors, perhaps. So I kind of think those ideas are funky.
Ding to the dong. There's another area of the show called the Concept Lounge, the Concept Store, where they got the kind of add-on accessories you'd have in garden centres, almost gift items. And this is right up your boulevard, Ellen Mary.
I can't tell what it is.
It's a water dispenser.
Yeah.
And the shape of it is, I have to look up how the guy explained it, but the shape of it is kind of helps to purify it by how the air flows. But also in the middle, there are crystals that are then energizing the water as well. And then you've obviously got your dispenser, and it's really,
that's cool.
And they've got smaller versions, and it's really, such a cool thing to then.
You can, you know, like a water bottle.
Inside.
Yeah, you know, like a water bottle that you might carry, like a you know, like whatever they're called. You can get ones now where in the center there's like a tube and it's full of crystals. So you just pour the water in around the tube, just carry it around. You'd be like,
yeah, that's basically what this is in a dispenser.
And it has the crystals in it. And that is so cool.
Because when I first walked up to it, I thought it was like when you have charcoal in the middle, and it obviously then it seeps out and into the water and has got that goodness. But of course, they are in the glass dome, kind of with the energy, rather than kind of seeping anything necessarily. Yeah. Oh, where are we?
Very cool.
So much. Kind of like almost like postcards that are preloaded with seeds. That was quite cool.
What about the plant vending machine that I've seen?
The flower vending machine, yeah. It's so funny because I've seen those around. I can't remember which country, but yeah, it was getting a lot of interest at the show as well. And of course, I knew that would be a winner for Instagram, you know.
Yeah. That's why it got posted to Instagram.
Let me see what else I've got. Loads of pictures of currywurst and frikandel. Do you want to see my big lemons?
Thank you. I really wanted to see your big lemons.
It's funny because I was saying to someone earlier, it's like you really, when you're there and you see it, it's almost like you have to write it up straight away. Like if I was to write this stuff up in a week, it wouldn't mean anything then. I'm really
assuming
mad.
we can see more on your Substack, right?
Yeah, definitely. I just really
so if you're a member of your Substack, you get to see more than what even we do if we're on just Instagram, right?
Absolutely. New plants news, and I've been doing daily little reports on there. Look at this plant, Ellen Mary. It's a new crashula with flowers. Isn't that cool?
Oh, that's really pretty.
Yeah.
What are those flowers? Greeny white?
Yeah.
Greeny white, limey colour.
Really hard to show you these, but yeah, look on my website. Really interesting kind of like plant ornaments as well with air plants in.
Oh my goodness, I have that. I have one. Genuinely, that was about the only Christmas decoration that I put up last year.
I can believe it.
A little white snowman and its head with a mini air plant. I might add, the mini air plant did die, however.
Oh no, too wet.
No, I think absolutely not wet at all.
Oh, okay, the opposite. I knew it was one or the other.
It completely died.
And it's funny because they were saying they are building plants for a TikTok generation, which is really a great way to market your plants and kind of develop your products. So because it is a viable market. You must have seen my reel with that apple trees. Like
so it's basically been
just trained
into
in that shape. Yeah.
So you think it's like a cordon apple tree. Yeah. This has basically been cordoned into a square or a globe. I mean, that's amazing.
It was done a lot kind of back in the early 19th century, I think, because they had a bit more time then, actually.
They had less TikTok.
Yeah.
They had more time to prune and train things.
Like new houseplants here and there, but not oodles. The better fair where you see a lot more of those is in autumn in Holland at the Flora Holland Fair.
Right.
But this kind of IPM's a real overview of a lot of different things, so kind of indoor, outdoor, accessories, etc. Obviously, trends and kind of concept stores, how you could put your garden centre together. This was quite cool. Like, you know, they have the different trends. This one is called Weltschmerz, which is kind of translates as a indulgent melancholy. And that again is something that's coming out of, you know, how people have been feeling about different things. And this is called Ella Mary. You'll see the reels on my doodah, but it was the European Floristry competition, and these guys will go through to the final. They were on a rotating stage, arranging their flowers. It's really mad. Like, I don't know if I could even stand up on a rotating stage, let alone do a flower display.
I don't think you could feel it. I don't think you feel it so much. Not as much as you think when you're on it.
True. But then I did some floristry, and oh my God, look at this. Honestly, I was under pressure, but...
What is that?
Well, it's kind of like almost a picture frame where you weave the flowers in. I was trying to make it contemporary, then I panicked and thought, Oh, well, I'll just put a heart in the middle.
I have a question. I have a question about houseplants. You just said there wasn't any new houseplants, but you would perhaps find them in August at a different show.
I didn't say there wasn't any, Ellen Mary.
Oh, that you said. I
said there wasn't oodles.
Okay, oodles or many. But I have a question about houseplants.
Yeah.
How many more new houseplants can there be?
Yeah, but you might say the same about petunias or this and that. It's like you develop plants for different reasons, like we know with vegetables, like newer vegetables might supersede or be better cropping than old ones. You might then have petunia that will flower later. And also what the consumer doesn't always realize is all the stuff that happens in the background. So like say if you've got, let's use petunia as an example because it's such a mainstream crop. Breeders are not just looking for new colours or ones that keep the consumer happy. It's also about how many fit on a trolley, how quick it is to crop, how all of this stuff behind the scenes, and that will be also applying to houseplants. So it could be sometimes that new houseplants are developed for, growing more efficiently from a young plant stage, but also ones that are different, new colours, this and that. I think, where can I find it? Have you heard of Georgiananthus?
No.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a bit. That's a really cool new plant with lovely deep red leaves and almost, I think that is on the cusp of being the next big thing,
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
when you see it, you'll know what I mean. But
was there any discussion about like houseplants being grown in peat-free? And the reason why I asked that is because there's been a conference just recently in the last week that I noticed, Alistair Griffiths from the RHS and Harriet's Plants, who grows in purely peat-free compost, had been on and talking about, and I wondered if that is in the industry yet or not.
Yeah. There definitely had been like panel discussions on it and stuff, and I saw Matt Appleby had been in one today. He was at the show later on, so yeah, it's quite interesting. But have you seen Jeb and Green? They're a new company doing peat-free houseplants near Cambridge. I was thinking we should go there sometime, actually.
Okay, yeah, let's go there. Very nice. Let's do that.
A few edibles. Do you remember we interviewed Libera once from Switzerland?
Yeah.
They've got edible passion flowers in different colours and different types of fruit. And I taste tested one and it was delicious, actually. I have to say. Perennial kales in lots of funky colours, variegated pinks.
Yeah.
Silvery ones. Rhubarb. A lot of different rhubarbs. A vegetable crop that hasn't been bred with that much for many years as well.
I love rhubarb.
Yeah, I was really, when I was on the stand, I was literally like, I just fancied rhubarb. Peanuts for growing outdoors. That's one to try, Ellen Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was that there. Oh, honestly, so much. Big flowered camellias, spider flowered azaleas. This, I bang on about flowering houseplants. Euphorbia millii.
Yeah.
Has been selected as a really nice, decent, just red flowered houseplant.
And it's not spiky. That one is that spiky? No.
Well, these are being selected to take away a lot of the spines. So it's a really nice plant, really. Yeah.
Very cool. That's so
floristry.
exciting.
I love the floristry as well. Oh, this.
So basically, if any of our listeners are, who's this? Is it a model? Is it like a mannequin?
No, it's a person.
Oh.
She's called Dolly Buster, and she's actually a celebrity porn star in Germany. And she was launching a new hydrangea with her name. And it was the most unusual press launch I'd ever been to. With Dolly Buster, yeah. Pretty unique.
Dolly Buster.
I don't think we have famous porn stars.
If only they do in America, definitely have famous.
Do they?
I don't know that we do in the UK, unless you are someone who watches a lot of it. Perhaps you would think that someone was famous. I don't know.
But for them to be in the mainstream is a whole different level, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. Dolly Buster. Well, there you go. I wonder how many listeners will Google that now.
Now, if you're looking for new houseplants, the Space Stars begonias.
That's nice.
They're Rex type begonias. So many amazing colours. Indoor, outdoor as well. So they were cool. Oh no. I thought that was the here it is. Georgiananthus, Midnight Pearl. How about that for a sexy new houseplant that you can get obsessed about, Ellen Mary?
Oh yeah, it's really deep colour.
Yeah.
Like the leaves are
I don't know how to describe it. It's like a chunky low Dracaena.
Maybe, yeah.
Know,
and
really,
the leaves seem really thick and silky and
proper glossy.
strong.
Oh, Ellen, I don't know if you would approve of this actually, because you can be a bit funny. When you got succulents on sticks in bouquets, yay or nay?
Well, what happens to them? What? No, I'm really confused about that. So,
well, do you know, like, to describe it to listeners, you've got echeverias that obviously are cut off at the base. So you've got a flat bottom and you then have a stick that is then pushed into that. Obviously, things like echeveria can last a long time out of soil and without a root, because obviously they're really succulent and they kind of just obviously fade away slowly. Those, if they're in a bunch of flowers, you could easily enjoy them for a few weeks, month, and then you could plant them up. So actually, this is kind of how you would propagate them naturally. So you might on one hand think it's kind of cruel and kind of a bit unjustified, but actually that's going to be okay, isn't it? And it's quite fun to see that in a bunch of flowers, do you think?
I think if those succulents can then be planted, then why not? But if it's to waste away and, for them...
I guess it's down to the consumer to do it and make it happen. Yeah. But one that I don't think would work, because they kind of need roots a bit more, is one I actually encouraged the guy to do it, so this is my fault. I was like, he had all these cactus cuttings there, and I said, what would it be like with cactus? So I got him to stick a cactus on top of a thing, and then I said, Ellen Mary is like, what sort of bunch of flowers would you put that one in? Well, maybe a bunch of flowers for your mother-in-law.
With a big prickly cactus in the middle of all these lovely flowers.
We are never not going to tell mother-in-law jokes in UK, are we? Oh, I got some new edibles for you. This is called Brahmi. That's the German word. It's actually Bacopa monerii.
Okay.
And apparently you can eat this and it gives you brain power.
Does it? Give me the Bacopa. Give it to me.
You can actually have like eat the raw leaves and have that. Not particularly tasty, but now this is called Sauerkraut, which means cheese herb. And these leaves, no word of a lie, Ellen Mary, tasted of camembert.
No.
The leaves tasted of camembert.
I need that plant because obviously I don't eat cheese, but I like the flavour of cheese. I just don't want to eat it. So yes, that would be amazing to have that.
That's an ethical question.
Why is it ethical?
I don't know. I just thought I was trying to whip up some...
It's ethical.
I was trying to whip up some vegan drama and then I backed out.
There's no drama here. There's no drama here.
The Latin
That's
name,
very cool.
Paideria lanuginosa, if you like to know. Did you know there are 60 type of Phoetonias in the marketplace?
Do you know? I'm really torn.
And they're named.
I've got a lovely one here and then a small one in the UK. And I think they can be a bit diva-ish.
Oh, yeah. But they bounce back easily. But it's like, well, don't behave like that in the first place, you know?
Yeah. Don't test my patience.
Yeah.
Well, all in all, it sounds like a very successful few days that you've
had. Well, I haven't finished yet, so...
Oh, my God. This really has turned into one of those olden days, look at my holiday photos.
Look what's unusual there. Is it
orange?
Red. Poinsettia. How cool is that? And I actually thought that shade was more uplifting, Ellen Mary.
Did you? Yeah, I like it. Especially since I don't like Christmas, so all is well in any...
Exactly. I feel that I'm losing your interest now, so I'm going to show you one more thing to give you a wow factor. You've got to tell me what it is. What is this flower?
I think that is a...
Be careful.
Yeah. Come back again. Oh, I think it's a calanchoe.
Really? No.
Yeah.
I'll give you a chance. It's 6 inches across. but that's a pretty good guess. I don't know if I will. It's
African
not.
violet.
No, I would have gone maybe a hellebore.
Oh, this
If
isn't
I
a
didn't
house
know.
plant. This isn't a house plant.
Well, it's a cut flower. It's a cut
Oh.
flower in the floristry section.
I don't know.
About 6 inches. It's a rose.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that a gist?
That
Mad.
is absolutely beautiful. I thought we were still on houseplants. Sorry.
Yeah. It's a rose, and it's called veggie.
That is beautiful.
It's called veggie.
It's called veggies.
Yeah.
So it's especially beautiful.
Really cool. I might put a reel on of that. I think that might get a bit of cover.
Yeah, that is really,
Yeah.
really amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's really exciting to hear the kind of things that will be coming to market and that we can expect to see and grow and use in the future.
Defo. Yeah, I mean, I would recommend to anyone in the trade. It's really cool to just see what's coming and just, be on the forefront of it. And it's a real tonic for January as well. And it really it almost signposts my year in a way, which sounds a little bit emotional. Or not.
And you're getting a nice dose of plants and colour and industry during
to the dong.
during the long month of January. Well, thanks for that update, Mr. Plant Geek. That was
no worries.
very cool indeed. So have you finished there now, and you back?
Yeah, it was the last day. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, but I'll be in France next week, allegedly skiing.
You're going skiing?
Yeah, didn't I tell you? Yeah, well, no, I don't know if I'm going skiing or not, really. I'm not sure. We're going
skiing next week as well. We're skiing as well. Where? In North Carolina.
Ah, you could drive there, I guess. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I maybe rent stuff, but I'm not naturally, I think I'm too tall to be a good skier. I don't know.
You can ski it.
Yeah, so I'm not I'm not going to cry if I don't do it every day, but it'd just be nice to just hang out and just be in the mountains and this and that. And but
I simply can't imagine you on ski going down a ski slope. I literally cannot imagine it.
Horrible.
I'm not being horrible.
Confident.
I think you would just want to stop at every tree or something that you see. I can't.
Be able to look at the trees. Am I? Well, to be honest, last time I skied was when I was 18 and I won this holiday in Wetherspoons or whatever because I was taken in there against my will. And I wasn't getting to the slopes until lunchtime because I was young and I was drinking and had a hangover most days. But then when I was then up there, I just fiddled around. And the one day I went down a longer kind of slope. I then ended up in a tree. Yeah, so I'll be careful.
Please do be careful. We don't want any broken bones. Thank you very much. Have a lovely time.
Thank you very much, Mum.
Have a lovely time. Be careful. Come back safely.
All right, I've put your dinner in the dog.
Okay, thank you.
Is that what
Bye.
you're supposed to say?
No, thank you. Bye.
All right, see you later, dog.
The music for the Plant Based podcast is part of the song Grow by Mikey James, and our editor is Gareth Patch of Semi Echo.